Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayerTV Synergies tier list video. Today our analysts will be ranking each synergy from S all the way down to the C tier for patch 12.4. This will be our first straight tier list for the mid set, but we do need to throw out a disclaimer. There's an upcoming B patch with a lot of potential meta-changing nerfs. What this means for this tier list is that we're basing the placements pre-nerfs, though we will be sure to talk about when synergies being nerfed and where they may end up after the meta settles. As usual, we're basing rankings on consistency and value in the meta. Just keep in mind the meta is likely to change throughout the week. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. At the top of the tier list is, of course, the S-tier synergies. This tier consists of Mastermind Scholar, Innovator, Bruiser, and Hextech. These traits are the best of the best currently, and quite a few of them are receiving nerfs in the B patch, so don't expect them to stay at the top for too long. First up, we have Mastermind and Scholar. We're putting these two synergies together entirely because of Silco. Silco is, to put it into understandable terms, absolutely broken. Mastermind helps high mana cost units get their abilities off quickly or just causes lower mana champions to insta-cast. Then, the cherry on top is Silco's ultimate can easily turn the tide of a late game fight. Scholar is also quite good not only because of Silco, but also Renata. These two paired together are a menace in the meta and naturally are both receiving nerfs in the upcoming B patch. They're going quite heavy on nerfing Silco, so there's a chance he disappears entirely from the meta, whereas Renata, they went a little bit lighter on, so expect to see her still performing decently. What a surprise that Innovator is still a top tier synergy. The bottom line is this synergy just scales way too well into the late game when you have 7 Innovators, especially since it does well throughout the rest of the game as well. There's few downsides to using this trait when your board is full of upgraded Innovators, as the real negative is not high rolling Jace early or being unable to find an emblem for 7 Innovator. The gap between 5 and 7 Innovator may be more prevalent after the B patch as they're nerfing the bear, meaning mid-game Innovator boards are much weaker now. Without doing anything to the dragon, we expect late game this synergy will be one of the strongest. By far the best frontline in the current meta goes to Bruisers. Lots of health, multiple units with triple traits, good utility, and CC. Rek'Sai and Sejuani in particular are why Bruisers are highly sought after in the meta. Both of them have triple traits, and Rek'Sai does a lot with her ability. Then later on you can transition into late game Bruisers like Vi and Tahm Kench, meaning a high roll early Bruiser board is a straight shot to the top 4. The nerfs will definitely hurt a lot for both Rek'Sai and Sejuani, to the point that Bruisers may fall down significantly in value. Our last S-tier synergy is Hextech. Hextech is one of the new synergies added in the mid set, and it's had an immediate impact on the meta. Whether early, mid, or late game, Hextech adds a lot of value to your board. The shields are by far more impactful early game, but having extra survivability is always useful. It's hard to say whether this synergy will fall post nerfs because they are hitting the trait itself quite a bit, while also nerfing Sejuani and Sivir. It may very well be a dead synergy in the meta given how hard they're going with the nerfs. Let's move on to the traits making up the bulk of the meta in the A tier. This tier consists of Chemtech, Mutant, Scrap, Socialite, Enchanter, Transformer, Enforcer, Colossus, and Glutton. While S tier synergies are by far the best, A tier traits are all about consistency. Sitting atop of the A tier is Chemtech. By far the main reason we're rating Chemtech so highly is due to Renata. Renata is crazy strong with Bruisers and Silco, and that composition has defined a portion of the meta. Tryndamere is doing alright in the meta, and even Twitch has a role. Overall, Chemtech seems to be a mainstay in the meta, at least until the B patch where they're nerfing Renata and Zac. Mutant is being carried entirely because of Rek'Sai, meaning after the B patch, we expect the synergy to fall down into the C tier. That said, Mutant has the highest variance of any synergy purely because of the mutation system. Some games the mutation is one of the stronger ones and increases the value of Mutant. Other games, it's not that great, so Mutant is less useful. But at the end of the day, the current value of Mutant is entirely based around early Rek'Sai and Cho'Gath, one of which is getting nerfed heavily. Scrap has risen in value thanks to Aurelia adding stability to the mid-game and Echo becoming an Innovator. Both of those champions are being nerfed, so Scrap may end up going back to just being an early game synergy. It's hard to say where Socialite is in the meta because at the end of the day, it's still a free boost in power to a carry for just one champion. That said, it's difficult to use Socialite effectively without Taric because Senna is not nearly as valuable. We expect to see Socialite float around a lot before a more concrete placement is found for it, but for now, it's still decently valuable. Similarly to Socialite, Enchanter is in a hard place because losing Janna and Taric hurt a lot. Orianna is still valuable, but not always splashable, and Senna doesn't provide frontline and heals far less than either Taric or Janna did. Morgana at least does well in the frontline, making it easier to splash Enchanter in. This is another synergy that we'll have to keep an eye on to see how valuable it is in future metas. 5 costs are in an interesting place because Silco can do so well at level 1, while a champion like Jace with Transformer needs level 2 to do well. Jace does provide value because of Innovator and Enforcer, but if you're looking for him to do truly well, you gotta 2-star him. Speaking of, Enforcer has become a force in the meta because it's so much easier to splash in with Sejuani and Vi being common in the meta. Perhaps after the nerfs to Sejuani and Rek'Sai, we'll see Bruisers used less, and as such, Enforcer will be common for now, but as far as utility traits go, Enforcer is quite useful to splash in. It's hard to say whether Colossus is valuable or not because it's rare we ever see any board utilize 2 Colossus champions. On its own, it does provide innate bonuses to the champions, but the main reason we're rating it so highly is due to Cho'Gath and Alistar being strong in the current meta. After the Hextech nerfs, it may shift the value of Colossus, but for now, it's comfortably in the A tier. And the final synergy for the A tier is Glutton. Tahm Kench is no longer the top frog bruiser, as Rek'Sai, Sejuani, and Vi have taken over the bruiser meta. Kench is still plenty viable if you hit him early enough and is essential for a full bruiser composition, so we can't fault him too much. Perhaps his value will go up after the B patch, but it's hard to say exactly. With that, we can move into the B tier synergies. This tier consists of Challenger, Debonair, Rival, Sniper, Mercenary, Yordle, Twinshot, Striker, Clockwork, and Bodyguard. Basically, this tier is for complementary synergies that are paired often with the A tier but aren't quite consistent enough or strong enough on their own. Kicking off the B tier, we have Challenger. Challenger certainly took a big hit losing both Yone and Fiora, but it has managed to recover well enough thanks to Tryndamere. Draven is still up in the air as to whether or not he'll be a viable carry because the VIP bonus is such a large boost in his damage. For now, we feel like Challenger's in a decent spot, but definitely has to improve in future balance patches. Debonair is the other new synergy added with the mid set, and unlike Hextech, it's nowhere near as valuable or consistent. There are definitely Debonair boards that do well, but with so many variations, it's hard to do well with this synergy consistently. That said, it does have a lot of potential thanks to Zeri, Debonair Emblem, and sometimes Draven, so don't write off the synergy just yet. Up next is the much better version of Sister, Rival. Rival is significantly better because it can buff Vi without Jinx. Hooray! Okay, Jinx isn't terrible, but come on, Vi is way better as a champion, and it's nice to be able to buff Vi without having to commit to using Jinx. Maybe if Jinx gets a few buffs, this will make Rival even better, but for now, half of the synergy is good with Vi, and the other half is meh with Jinx. We wanted to rate Sniper lower on the list because it honestly feels like a fake trait most of the games. The champions aren't bad like early game Caitlyn, mid game Misfortune, and late game Zeri or Jhin. We aren't happy with the trait itself, but the fact that those champions are doing well does add value to the trait as a whole. Next are the 2 econ synergies, with the first being Mercenary. Mercenary is still a high variance trait to play, so some games you're going to pog and other games you'll be dog. That's alright as long as you know playing Mercenaries is a risk. Yordles, on the other hand, are a bit harder to use effectively after the mid-set changes. It shouldn't be a shocking truth that Heimerdinger was a far better carry than Corki or Gnar, so trying to econ with Yordles without taking infinite damage is much harder. That said, the high roll potential of Yordles is crazy with the new augment that gives each summoned Yordle a chance to be holding an item component. Overall, Yordles are weaker, but somehow have more high roll potential. Midset definitely improved how Twinshot functions by turning it into a 2, 3, 4, 5 tier trait. A lot easier to use when using a Twinshot carry, but the problem is, who's a good carry? Lucian is decent but requires good augments, and Hextech is about to take a nosedive in the meta. Corki is, well, not great the majority of the time. Gangplank is decent with Mercenary and augments, and Jinx is, well, still Jinx. Without a consistent carry, Twinshot is doomed to suffer in the mid-set. Striker is one of the most boring synergies in TFT, and we don't rate it highly at all because of that. Bonus AD is nice and all, but do you really want to commit more than 2 spots on your board for it when an item can give the same results? Striker is hard carried by Rek'Sai, Irelia, and Sivir, but guess what? All 3 of them are being nerfed in the B patch. It's not fair that Clockwork is so down on the tier list, but the fact is, splashing this trait is difficult even if you're using Orianna. If it was just slightly easier to splash 2 Clockwork in, or even 4, we'd value it higher, but that's just not the reality we're currently living in. And the final synergy of the B tier is Bodyguard. Bodyguard as a frontline trait is not doing that poorly in the meta, but to be honest, it has nothing to do with the trait itself. The units like Braum and Leona are good, and it's fine to run them without Bodyguard entirely. But as with any frontline synergy, this can change drastically from patch to patch, so don't expect Bodyguards to always be so low on the tier list. Let's now move on to our final tier, the C tier. This tier consists of Arcanist, Syndicate, Assassin, and Yordle Lord. These are the bottom of the barrel traits that occasionally do well, but in general aren't going to be all that useful. At the top of the list, we have Arcanist, a synergy suffering from a lack of a valuable mid-game carry. Malzahar can carry, but requires a good mutation, and Victor is a great late-game carry, but being a 5 cost is not that reliable. That leaves Ahri, who most of the time is ridiculously underwhelming, especially compared to the champion that she replaced, Lux. Overall, it is possible to do well with an Arcanist composition, but on average, it's going to result in bottom 4s more than any other placement. Syndicate is suffering after losing both Shaco and Akali. There is a build that utilizes Ashe carry, but it's such an outlier we can't reliably bump up Syndicate's value because of it. Morgana is a nice addition to the frontline meta, but she doesn't really care about Syndicate, as Enchanter is the better trait. And of course, Ahri is way too unreliable. We're interested in seeing how they address Syndicate in future patches, since it's clearly on the struggle bus. Poor Assassin lost so many valuable champions, and all it gained was a utility 1 cost and a 4 cost that leaps more than it attacks. The saving grace for Assassin is the Twitch reroll board, but even that's not consistent enough to drag Assassin up in the tier list. If they improve the Kha'Zix AI, we may eventually see Assassins return to the meta, but for now, consider them to be very niche. And the final synergy is, of course, Yordle Lord. The trait is still a meme, and you're better off forgetting it exists for 99% of your games, with the 1% being to sell Veigar when playing 6 Yordles. And that's all we have for today's tier list video. The meta definitely favors specific champions and traits, so we're mostly interested in seeing what the new meta will be after the B patch. Let us know in the comment section below what new synergy you like the most from the mid set. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.